Hey everyone, and welcome to our little study group for PP 5375. That's Economic Analysis for Public Policy and Management. Today we're digging into the readings from Section 06, all about production and production costs. Now, every manager, really anyone making decisions, wants to make smarter ones, and to do that, you absolutely need the right tools. So today we're going to build that ultimate manager's toolkit. We're going to dive into the core economic principles that really shape every single business decision out there.
So, let's just start with this huge question. What does it really cost to run a business? I mean, your first thought is probably, wages, rent, materials, and yeah, you're not wrong, but that's only half the picture. To make those really smart, forward-looking decisions, managers have to learn to think less like an accountant and a whole lot more like an economist.
And to get you thinking that way, we're going to build out your Essential Manager's Toolkit, one piece at a time. We've got 5 crucial concepts to cover. First, we'll figure out what the real cost of something is. Then we'll talk about the costs you should actually just ignore. After that, we'll look at your costs in the short run, then how to plan for the long run. And finally, the secret to getting smarter and cheaper over time. All right, let's start building.
First tool in the box, figuring out the real cost. And this whole thing starts with understanding a really fundamental difference in how you look at the world.
Okay, so check this out. Accountants, they're like historians. They have a retrospective view. They look backward at all the receipts and expenses to report on what has already happened. And that's super important for financial statements, right? But economists and good managers have to be fortune tellers. They have to be forward-looking. They're trying to figure out how to use their resources now to make more money in the future. And that requires a totally different idea of what cost even means.
And that brings us to maybe the most important tool in the entire toolkit: opportunity cost. Look, this isn't just about the money you spend. It's about the opportunities you give up. Every time you decide to use a resource, your time, your money, a piece of land, you're also deciding not to use it for the next best thing. That road not taken, it has a value, and that value is a very, very real economic cost.
This quote is just a perfect example of people missing the point. When Northwestern was figuring out where to build a new law school, people argued the downtown Chicago spot was basically free because, hey, the university already owned the land. An economist would just be pulling their hair out. The opportunity cost was massive. They could have sold that prime piece of real estate for an absolute fortune. That money they gave up, that was the true economic cost of the land, making it an incredibly expensive choice, not a free one.
Okay, tool number 1 is in the kit. Always think about opportunity cost. Now for our second tool, which is just as powerful, and it's all about knowing which costs you should just completely ignore. This is how you avoid a super common mental trap called the sunk cost fallacy.
So, what is a sunk cost? Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's money that's already out the door. It's been spent, and you can never, ever get it back. It's a done deal. You can't unspend it, you can't recover it, no matter what you decide to do next, it's gone. And here's the absolute key. You have to pretend it never happened. Sunk costs are water under the bridge. Seriously, they might make you feel bad. Maybe it was a terrible decision, but that money is completely, 100% irrelevant to any decision you have to make from this point forward. Letting those past unrecoverable costs mess with your future choices, that's the sunk cost fallacy, and it leads to some truly bad decisions. Let's make this real. Imagine a company pays $500,000 for an option to buy a building for $5 million. Poof, that $500,000 is a sunk cost. It is gone forever. Then a new, maybe even better building comes on the market for $5.25 million. So what do? The trap is to think, well, we already spent $500K, so that first building is really costing us $5.5 million. Wrong. That $500K is irrelevant now. The real choice is about the future. Do we spend an additional $5 million, or do we spend a new $5.25 million? Well, $5 million is obviously cheaper. Ignoring the sunk cost gets you to the right answer every time.
Okay, our toolkit is looking good. We've got opportunity costs, and we know to ignore sunk costs. The next tool is all about time. Specifically, how the costs you can actually control change based on your time horizon. Let's start with the short run.
In the short run, we basically split all our costs into 2 big buckets. You've got your fixed costs. These are the bills you have to pay no matter what. Whether you make 0 widgets or 1,000,000 widgets, you still have to pay the insurance, the rent on the factory, your manager's salaries. Then you have your variable costs. These go up and down directly with your output. The more cars you make, the more steel you have to buy, and the more wages you pay your assembly line workers.
And this whole idea is what really separates the short run from the long run.
The short run isn't about a set amount of time, like a month or a year. It's any period where at least one of your inputs is stuck. It's fixed. You can't just magically build a new factory overnight. But in the long run, well, in the long run, anything is possible. Everything is variable. You can build that new factory, you can get more airplanes, you can change whatever you want. Think about Delta. If they cancel 10% of their flights next month, a huge chunk of their costs are still fixed. But give them a couple of years, they can sell off planes, reduce their staff, those costs suddenly become variable.
So what about the cost of making just one more thing? That's what we call marginal cost. And there's this beautifully simple little formula that connects your production to your cost. Marginal cost equals the wage rate divided by the marginal product of labor. So what on earth does that mean? Just think about it this way. If your workers start becoming less productive, that's what we call diminishing returns, their marginal product of labor, or MPL, goes down. And what happens in math when you divide by a smaller and smaller number? The result gets bigger. Your marginal cost goes up. It literally costs you more to make that next one.
All right, let's zoom way out from the day-to-day and talk about the big picture, long-run planning. This is where companies make those huge strategic moves about growth, and it's where they can find some seriously powerful cost advantages through something called scale and scope. So first up is a classic you've probably heard about, economies of scale. This is the whole bigger is cheaper idea. Basically, it means that as a company gets bigger and ramps up its operations, the average cost to produce each individual item can actually go down. You can literally double what you make, but it costs you less than double to do it. But why? How does that work?
Well, it boils down to three main reasons. First, specialization. In a bigger company, workers can focus on the one or two things they're amazing at, instead of one person trying to do 10 different jobs. That makes everyone way more efficient. Second, size just gives you more flexibility to organize your production lines in smarter ways. And third, you get buying power. When you're buying your supplies by the truckload instead of by the box, you can bet you're going to negotiate a much better price.
Now, there's a cousin to this idea called economies of scope. This isn't about making more of the same thing, it's about making different things together more cheaply. For example, it might be cheaper for one company to make both cars and tractors than for two separate companies to do it, because they can share things like managers, supply chains, or expensive machinery. It's kind of like a two for the price of one deal on the production side.
All right, time for our final tool, and this one is really cool. It shows that cutting costs isn't just about getting bigger, it's also about getting smarter. This is all about the power of experience, which economists capture with something called the learning curve.
So the learning curve is this idea that as a company produces more and more stuff over its entire lifetime, we call that cumulative output, it just gets better at it. It's learning by doing. Your workers get faster, your managers get better at scheduling, your engineers find clever ways to improve the design. The whole organization literally learns, and that experience drives down the cost of making every single unit.
And this is such a critical distinction that people often get mixed up. Economies of scale is about getting cheaper by getting bigger, right? It's like you're moving to a lower point on your current cost curve. But learning is about getting cheaper by getting smarter and more experienced. It causes your entire cost curve to shift down. This means that even if you're producing the exact same amount as last year, it costs you less to do it simply because your organization has gotten wiser.
So there you have it, your manager's essential toolkit for understanding the real cost of production. It's about seeing the costs that aren't on the spreadsheet, the opportunity costs. It's about knowing which costs to completely ignore, the sunk costs. It's about knowing what you can actually control right now, what it costs to do just one more, and how to use the power of both size and wisdom in the long run.
And all of this leaves us with a final, big strategic question for any manager, for any leader to really think about. When you're trying to become more efficient and lower your costs, what's the better path? When is it smarter for a business to grow big, and when is it smarter for it to grow wise? The answer, as we've seen, isn't always obvious, and it starts with a deep understanding of what cost truly means.